The odor struck Boone Carter prior to his eyes being able to make out anything. It was the scent of death, stale, old death, mixed with something more, the acrid aroma of the living among the dead. His horse snorted and backed up as they approached the dilapidated cabin on horseback, but Boone had tracked too many trails, hunted too many criminals, to be deterred by a bad smell at this point. What he discovered within, however, was not a further hidden den, a start to a horror. He'd been tracking the Crimson Creek gang through 3 days of scorching Nevada desert sun, and this tumble-down shack was their latest known whereabouts. The reward for the capture of the gang leader would mean a couple of months of relaxation and good eating. But the instant Boone swung open the groaning wooden door, money was no longer relevant. In the corner of the one-room cabin was a girl, maybe 13. She had black, dirty, matted hair, a once blue dress that was now tattered rags. But it was not her that held Boone motionless. It was what she was chained to, a skeleton. Bleached human bones, worn by time and desert sand, were propped against the wall, still dressed in rotting bits of a man's apparel. Her ankle was chained to the skeleton's wrist by a rusty iron chain. She gazed up at Boone with eyes much too old for her young face. Boone had witnessed horrors previously, but not like these. The girl did not scream or wail. She did not even flinch. She just gazed at him with a tranquility that was more horrifying than terror could ever be. He moved deeper, his boots grinding over bones and trash. The cabin had obviously been left untouched for years, but the girl, she wasn't dead, hardly, gaunt, ghost-like. How long had she been here, and how had she managed to survive? She cocked her head, examining him as though uncertain whether he existed or was another creation of malnutrition and solitude. When she spoke, her voice was husky, little more than a whisper. "Are you going to take me away from Papa?" Boone's stomach churned. Papa? He glanced down at the skeleton, the apparel, the posture. This wasn't a corpse. This was someone she loved. "Child," Boone said quietly, removing his hat, "how long have you been here?" The girl gazed at the bones beside her with an almost tenderness. Then she gazed back at Boone. "Papa told me never to leave him. Said bad men would come if I wasn't there to guard his bones." The chain jingled when she shifted slightly. Boone saw the red, infected flesh around her ankle, raw from months, perhaps years, of rusty iron grating against skin. Yet she guarded that bone like it was holy. What Boone was about to discover would shake everything he ever thought about loyalty, family, and the darkness love can lead to. He knelt slowly, careful not to make any sudden moves. He'd handled wild, vicious animals before, but never anything as delicate or as hurt as this girl. "What is your name, child?" he inquired. "Mercy," she breathed, her hand glancing softly across one of the skeleton's bones. "Mercy Whitmore, and my papa, Silas Whitmore." The name hit Boone like a punch in the gut. Silas Whitmore, a name known to all lawmen and bounty hunters west of the Mississippi. A man with 15 bank robberies and dozens of murders pending. A ghost story with a price on it. Silas Whitmore had vanished 3 years ago, without a trace. His bounty remained uncollected, and now Boone was staring at what was left of him. "Mercy." Boone murmured, "Your papa, when did he pass away?" The girl seemed puzzled, appearing as if death was not the right word. "He fell ill after the evil men visited, began coughing blood, couldn't stop shivering, but he made me promise to remain. Told me if I left, the vultures would get him. Said he'd never be at peace." Boone's eyes, searched the room. There were little offerings near the skeleton, torn pieces of cloth, dried flowers that had wilted, pieces of glass. Mercy had been decorating the body, trying to comfort it even in death. "The bad men," Boone said, his voice strained tight. "When did they get here?" "Long time ago," Mercy whispered, her voice shaking. "Papa told them they were looking for money he had stolen from the Carson City Bank. He had hidden it before they came, but they wanted him to tell them where." Her voice lowered even further. "They heard him real bad, trying to get him to talk, but Papa never said anything to them." Boone trembled, unrelated to the desert wind whistling through the cabin crevices. If Silas had hidden that Carson City money before he died, and these men had tortured him for it, then Mercy, where did your papa hide it, do you know? Fear played on her pallid face. "Papa made me swear never to say a word," she told him. "He told me it was the only way he could keep me safe." She pulled harder on the chain at her ankle. "He said, if I remained here and kept his secret buried, the bad men would believe he took it to his grave." But she was painfully wrong. There was a noise of horses outside, pounding across the hard-pan desert. Boone's hand went involuntarily to his Colt revolver. 4 or 5 men were riding directly toward the cabin. Mercy heard them as well. She gasped in fear, reaching for her father's rib cage. "They're back," she whispered. "The bad men are back." Boone crept toward a window that was boarded up, peering through an opening. 5 mounted men, each with a gun, and leading them was Dutch Kellerman, one of the most dangerous outlaws at large. If Dutch was around, rumor had spread that someone was disturbing Silas Whitmore's tomb. "Mercy," whispered Boone in a panic, "I need you to tell me precisely where your papa stashed that money, immediately." But as the riders came near, Boone understood that cash could be the absolute last of their worries. Dutch Kellerman did not leave any witnesses. He was hearing the sounds, horses pounding, Dutch's raspy voice yelling commands. They would reach the cabin within a minute and a half. Mercy was fastened to a skeleton, having no escape. "Listen carefully to me," whispered Boone, examining his rifle and pistol. "I'm going to get you out of those chains, but I must have something to break them with." Mercy tossed her head frantically. "No, Papa told me not to leave him. If I do, his soul will never have peace, and the curse will haunt me forever." Boone frantically searched the cabin. His eyes landed on a very old rusty pickaxe, propped against the other wall, likely left behind by its creator years ago. He seized it. He held it to the chain link near Mercy's ankle and whispered, "Don't move. This will hurt, but it's better than what those men will do to you." Mercy caught his arm with an unaccustomed intensity. "Papa told me something before he died. About you." Boone stiffened. "About me?" "Papa said a man would one day come, a man with kind eyes but dangerous hands." Mercy's voice was a whisper now. "He said that man would try to save me, but only if I told him the truth about the money." Boone's heart pounded as the horseman approached. Mercy's voice was throaty. "Papa said the money isn't just hidden, it's cursed. Anyone who handles it dies." Outside, Dutch's voice shouted about circling the cabin, about ensuring no one escaped alive. "What do you want me to do?" Boone spat. Mercy indicated the skeleton of her father. "Papa swallowed the map when he died. He forced himself to swallow the one thing that would bring him to the Carson City gold. It's in his bones somewhere." Boone was left standing in shocked silence, gazing down at the scattered remains. No surprise Dutch's gang never found a secret hoard. They were searching for something concealed in trunks when the actual treasure map was inside Silas Whitmore's body. "That's why you can't leave him," Boone rationalized. "You're not sitting beside his bones. You're watching over the largest bank robbery stash in Nevada history." The cabin door swung open, ripped from its hinges by Dutch Kellerman's boot. Light flooded through the broken door, casting the silhouettes of 5 men armed to the teeth against the blinding desert sun. "Well, well," Dutch drawled, his hand resting comfortably on his revolver. "Looks like we got ourselves a little family reunion." Boone rose slowly to his feet, his hands visible but poised. He was outnumbered 5-1, with a girl chained to a skeleton and information men had already died for. But what the Dutch said next shattered all of Boone's presuppositions. "Hello, Uncle Boone," Dutch answered with a chilly grin. "Long time since Carson City." The words felt like a punch to the stomach. "Uncle Boone?" Boone gazed into the outlaw's face, and suddenly recognition struck him. Black eyes, that stubborn jaw. 15 years had lined it with marks of violence and greed, but there was no doubt. "Danny?" Boone whispered. "Danny Kellerman?" "It's Dutch now," he stated, entering the cabin as his men dispersed. "Been Dutch since you left me to die in that prison cell?" Mercy's gaze jumped from one man to the other, her confusion and terror struggling on her face. The chain rattled as she stepped further towards her dead father. Boone's thoughts flashed back to that night in Carson City. Danny had just turned 18, crazy, mad, and adrift after his parents were killed. He'd trailed along behind Boone wherever he went, like a lost puppy seeking direction. And Boone had tried. He'd tried to guide him to something more. But the night Danny broke into that general store, it was Boone who reported him, his own nephew. "I did what I considered was best," answered Boone warily. "You were going in the wrong direction, and I thought a few months in jail would give you a shake." Dutch laughed humorlessly. "A few months? They gave me 5 years. 5 years in hell because my own flesh and blood decided to play sheriff." He pulled out his gun in a slow, menacing movement. "But I did find out a lot in there, like how loyalty to family is just another lie, and the only thing that ever matters in this world is power." One of Dutch's men, a burly, scarred man called Pike, stepped nearer to Mercy. "Boss, what about the girl?" he said, looking at her icy cold. "She knows where the money is." Dutch sneered. "Sure she does. Been waiting here guarding Daddy's bones like a good little dog." He faced Mercy, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "Ain't that right, darling? You know perfectly well where Papa stashed that shiny little heap of Carson City gold." Mercy's voice was trembling but firm. "My papa didn't steal anything. He was a good man." Pike guffawed, loud and bitter. "Good man? Your papa murdered more folk than smallpox, girl." And that's when Boone decided he had to choose. He could attempt to use Dutch, his own nephew, his blood. It would most likely cost him his life, his and Mercy's. Or he could surrender, let these monsters take her, and hope later to figure out a way to save her. What would you do? Would you risk everything, outgun 5 pistols to save an innocent child? Or live to fight again, with any conception of what they would do to her in the meantime? Let me know in the comments, because what Boone did next would decide whether Mercy lived to see another sunset. Boone locked gazes with Dutch, hoping to see some glimmer of the kid he'd once tried to save, but there was nothing but a killer staring back with his face. "Danny," Boone whispered, "whatever you're planning to do to that girl, I won't let you do it." Dutch's smile became wider. "Uncle Boone, you're not in a place to do anything to stop us, but don't worry, we'll make it quick for you. Family discount." But Dutch had forgotten something, the most important thing Boone ever tried to teach him. Never turn your back on a man with nothing left to lose. Boone shifted. Fast. His Colt went leather in an instant. Faster than Dutch remembered. The first shot tore through Pike's chest before he reached Mercy. The second felled one of Dutch's men near the door. But Dutch and his remaining 2 men were already getting behind cover, their return fire shredding the cabin walls. "Down!" Boone shouted to Mercy, but she was already flat on the floor, still chained to her father's skeleton, unable to move more than a few feet. Dutch's voice roared from behind an overturned table. "That was a mistake, Uncle. Now we're going to take our time with both of you." Bullets whizzed past Boone's head as he ducked behind the stone hearth of the cabin. His mind was already counting. 2 shots fired, 4 shots in the cylinder, and 3 or more shooters to go. The odds were against him, but he'd been in worse. "Mercy!" he shouted. "Can you grab that pickaxe?" The girl lay out on the floor, the iron chain around her ankle jangling loudly as she reached for the tool Boone had dropped. Her fingers closed on the handle. Almost got it. More gunfire erupted outside. Boone heard Dutch shouting commands. "Jacobs, flank around the back. Morrison, cover him. Don't shoot him. I want to know where Silas really hid that gold." Dutch still did not understand. There was no secret hideout or buried loot. The gold was with them, in Silas Whitmore's skeleton. Mercy grasped the pickaxe and started swinging. The chain rang with every blow. 3 years under desert sun had weakened the iron to rust. The metal groaned under the blows. "Keep at it," Boone said, reloading his Colt. "That's it." A shadow crossed the back window. "Jacobs." Boone fired through the glass. The scream that emerged informed him he'd hit his target. 2 men left, and Dutch. Good odds. But Dutch was not the sort to move in haste. He'd wait Boone out, wait for him to spend all his rounds before he moved. From outside, Dutch called again. "Uncle Boone, there's only one end. You surrender now. I arrange for the girl to die quick and clean. Keep fighting, and Morrison gets to get acquainted with her first." Boone clenched his hold on the revolver tighter. His jaw clamped. Behind him, the final chain broke. Mercy was free, but technically only. Liberty in a cabin with murderers was not quite so precious. "There's a root cellar," she panted, "under the floorboards. Corner by the stove, leads out to a tunnel, opens up near the old well." Boone nodded. An exit. But to get away from there meant leaving Dutch alive. And Dutch wouldn't give up. Not when there was gold on the line. He'd find them, and he'd do it with a smile. Boone stood before the floorboards, ready to leave. Then something changed. The wind caught another sound. Hooves. Dozens of them. A drumbeat that stilled even the shooting. Everyone in the cabin froze. This wasn't Dutch's crew, it was something else. Larger. Through the bullet-scarred wall, Boone saw uniforms. Blue. Dozens of riders closing off a space. The U.S. Cavalry. A voice thundered out, deep and commanding. "This is Captain Harlan Briggs of the 3rd Cavalry. Surrender your guns and come out with your hands up." Dutch went white. This had nothing to do with the gold anymore, not some outlaw treasure hunt deal. This was bigger and darker. Boone looked at Mercy. Her eyes widened with the same understanding registering in his gut. "Mercy," he breathed. "What was your papa really doing before all this, before he turned outlaw?" She blinked, confused. "He was a soldier, fought south, said that's when he learned to shoot so well." "What regiment?" She hesitated. "Third Cavalry," she whispered. "Same as that man outside." Boone felt the floor drop away from beneath his stomach. Her papa wasn't just a soldier. He was one of them. Mercy's voice trembled as it all became clear. "He said the Army wasn't paying their men for what they were owed. Said that money from Carson City, it wasn't robbery, it was back pay." Boone looked at the bones beside her, the man they'd all spoken of in terms of outlaw, thief, legend. Silas Whitmore hadn't stolen that gold. He'd taken it because it was his. Whitmore hadn't been your average outlaw. He'd been a 3rd Cavalry deserting soldier. And the government salary money he'd pilfered. Now, years later, the Army had come for not just their gold, but their ghost. Dutch obviously figured along those lines. "We got bigger fish to fry than reunions," he growled. "If the cavalry's here, this ain't no bounty. This is federal." Captain Briggs' voice boomed across the desert. "You have 60 seconds to surrender. We're lucky Silas Whitmore's in there, and we know he has United States government assets in his possession." Mercy's whisper was barely audible. "Papa's been dead 3 years. How can they not know that?" But Boone did. The cavalry wasn't after a corpse. They were following records, reports, old trails, chasing a man they still believed was alive. They didn't know Silas had died in that very cabin. To them, he was still a fugitive. "We need to get out of here, now," Boone said. "If they find us with the remains of a Federal deserter, we'll be hanged for conspiracy." Dutch agreed. "Morrison," he called, "we're leaving." "What about the gold?" Morrison yelled back. "Forget the gold. Move!" But no sooner had Morrison and Dutch drifted away to the rear wall and started kicking loose the boards than Captain Briggs bellowed something which froze Boone. "Sil Whitmore, we know that you have your daughter in there with you. Send the girl out safely, and we'll talk about a plea bargain." Daughter. They thought Mercy was his daughter. To them, this was not just a robbery, it was a hostage situation. "They think you're his daughter," Boone realized out loud, "and they think he's still alive, using you as a decoy." Mercy clenched the broken chain that had bound her for years. "If I step out and tell them Papa's dead, they'll ask about the money, and I promised I'd never admit." 30 seconds, Briggs bellowed. Dutch had nearly made it over the wall. Morrison was hard on his tail, both men eager to vanish before the cavalry arrived. Boone looked at Mercy, then at Silas's skeleton, still outstretched like a monument to all they'd lost, then at the circle of soldiers tightening like a noose. All roads led to disaster, surrender, and Mercy would be thrown into Federal custody, questioned until she broke. Run, and they'd be pursued. For the gold, for harboring a corpse of a deserter, for surviving the wrong story. But then, a third possibility, one that no one had considered, one that would possibly get Silas's demands done and save Mercy's life. It was crazy, daring, and it just might succeed. "Mercy!" Boone spoke in a hasty, urgent tone. "Do you trust me?" But before she could answer, Briggs's voice bellowed out one final order. "Take the cabin!" Chaos erupted. Gunfire split the air as blue-clad soldiers stormed in from 3 sides. Dutch and Morrison ripped free the last section of the back wall and crawled out into the open desert. Boone pulled Mercy after him and dived for the floor hatch. He tore it open as bullets chewed the air overhead. "Go! Now!" They plunged into the darkness below the root cellar. War raged above them, splintered wood, screams, wails, the boot and rifle butt impacts. The cavalry was tearing the cabin apart, seeking a man dead for 3 years. The tunnel Mercy had warned them of lay before them, not wide enough for a grown person to crawl. It smelled of filth and decayed wood, and was supported by creaking beams under pressure. "Are you hurt?" Boone whispered as they slipped into the black. "No," she panted. Then she broke. "But Papa's bones! They're destroying everything up there. Everything I had of him." Boone clenched his teeth. He could feel her anguish. They had to keep going, though. The tunnel was older and weaker than he'd expected. Timber beams creaked, their wooden joints groaning as dust seeped from above. Footfalls above them. Soldiers were now searching around the cabin. It was only a matter of time before someone found the tunnel's entrance. They reached a split in the path, two narrow tunnels leading in opposite directions. Mercy froze, trying to remember. Which way? She hesitated. Then, left. Papa said, "Always go left when you're lost underground." They turned left. Mercy led the way, crawling through the narrow tunnel as Boone followed close behind, pistol drawn. But then, a voice that made Boone's blood run cold. "Dutch!" His voice echoed through the darkness, distant but far too close. "I know you're down there, Uncle. This tunnel's got two ways out. Morrison's watching the other one." Boone's breath caught in his chest. Dutch had found the tunnel system sometime during the chaos above, and now they were trapped. Mercy whispered, "We can't go back. The soldiers will catch us." Boone's voice was serious. "And we can't move. Dutch is waiting. Caught between the cavalry and a killer. No escape. No rescuers coming." Then Mercy placed her hand in the torn pocket of her skirt. "I have something," she whispered. She pulled out a little package, neatly wrapped in oilcloth, worn thin with years. She unwrapped it slowly, as if she were handling holy things. "Papa gave me this when he died. Told me if I was ever truly in a bind, this would get me out." She flipped it over to Boone. He spread the yellowed paper wide and held it to the faint sliver of light coming through a crack in the ceiling of the tunnel. Not a treasure map, not a confession, a military document, with a flamboyant signature at the end that sent Boone's heart flying. Ulysses S. Grant. "Mercy!" Boone caught his breath. "This is no letter. This is a presidential pardon." Dutch's sneering voice called out again. "Come on out, Uncle. Time for our little family reunion to be over proper." But Boone was no longer listening to Dutch. He was reading the words on that paper. The pardon wasn't for robbery, not even desertion. It was for services rendered to the Union in matters of national security. Silas Whitmore hadn't stolen the payroll. He'd been told to take it. He was an agent. "Your papa didn't steal the Carson City money," Boone gasped. "He was on it. It was all part of a government operation." Mercy's eyes overflowed with tears. "I knew he was a good man," she said. "Nobody ever believed me." Boone felt it now, everything clicking into place. Silas hadn't been running from the law. He'd been running from Confederate agents. The gang that tortured him hadn't been outlaws. They'd been enemy operatives, trying to rip Union secrets from a dying man. Dutch's voice came again, closer this time, impatient. "I'm losing patience, Uncle." But Boone had one last move. He raised his voice loud and clear, letting it echo through every tunnel, up to the shattered remains of the cabin above. "Captain Briggs, this is Boone Carter. I'm in the tunnel with Mercy Whitmore, and I've got federal documents that prove Silas Whitmore was operating under presidential authority." The gunfire above stopped. Silence, heavy and instant. Then, "What documents?" Briggs called back, wary. Boone held the parchment high. A presidential pardon signed by Grant himself. Silas Whitmore was Union intelligence. The Carson City operation was authorized. There was a long, loaded pause. Then Captain Briggs's voice, cautious now. "Come on up slow. Hands in sight. Bring the papers." "Can't do that, Captain," Boone yelled back. "Dutch Kellerman has us pinned down, and he's not interested in presidential pardons." No one was prepared for what was next. From out of the black in front of them, Dutch appeared. His gun was down. His face wasn't twisted in anger anymore, just confusion. "Union spy?" Dutch growled. "If Silas was working for the government, then that means—" "You've been running after the wrong loot for 3 years," Boone summed up. "And it means Morrison's going to learn the consequences of meddling with the family of a federal agent." Behind them, boots on wood clanged. Cavalrymen moving in from both sides of the tunnel. Captain Briggs had cut around them. Dutch looked at Boone, Mercy, and the paper in Boone's hand. Everything he had assumed was a lie. "Bad decisions, Uncle," Dutch answered, cracking. "We all have bad ones, Danny," Boone answered. Dutch slowly unbuckled his gun. It took seconds for the cavalry to ride up on both flanks. Morrison tried to make his escape, but was tackled and dumped into the dirt before he'd made 2 steps. The standoff was all over in minutes. Captain Briggs took the paper from Boone, reading it closely as his men evacuated the tunnel. His jaw set when he read, then looked at Mercy, dignified, courteous. "Miss Whitmore, in the name of the United States government, sorry for what you've had to endure. Your father was a hero." Mercy wiped at her tears with the cuff of her sleeve. "May I bury him properly now?" she whispered. "With military honors?" Captain Briggs placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "He'll be buried at Arlington," he said to her, "with full honors, the kind reserved for heroes." 3 hours later, as the desert sun dipped below the horizon red-stained, Boone helped carry what was left of Silas Whitmore, bones, buttons, the badge he never got to wear, into a cavalry wagon bound for the east. Mercy would be with them, left in the hands of those who could give her the life Silas struggled to keep. Not gold, not fame, just peace. Dutch and his chains rode in another wagon, battered but silent. But Captain Briggs had heard Boone's word about Dutch holstered pistol, about what he'd decided when it mattered. There might be redemption still on the horizon. At the turning point of the wagon, Mercy made one last spin about. "Thank you," she said to Boone. "Papa said the right man would show up. He was right about you." Boone removed his hat, a tight lump of emotion constricting his throat. "Your papa was fearless," he said. "You take care, Miss Mercy." She gave him a tearful smile and a determined nod, then got onto the wagon. The cavalry column moved out into the blackness of twilight. Dust, hooves, squeak of wheels, then silence. There for the hideous length of time, Boone watched them disappear into the desert dusk. Then he climbed into the saddle. There were other bounties to be hunted, other wrongs to be righted, but for the first time in years he felt as if he'd done something that truly mattered, not for the money, not for the fame, but for a man's name, for a daughter's truth, for a past finally uncovered. Sometimes the most precious things aren't silver or gold. Sometimes they're second chances. Family, forgiveness, and the truth finally spoken.